Hello, my name is Roger Bohmrich. Welcome to Millezima's Wine Memos. We're going to speak about Sauvignon Blanc for a few minutes. This is clearly one of the more aromatic grape varieties, sometimes in certain conditions often herbaceous. And it tends to be a wine that is best enjoyed young. It ranges, however, really from almost the neutral or the innocuous to the extremely pungent in terms of the style of wines that it produces. Sauvignon Blanc is a very vigorous vine. It must be allowed to ripen fully. If it does not, the more herbaceous characteristics seem to dominate the finished product. It's quite sensitive to both rot and to mildews. At best, it's a vividly etched wine, refreshing, dry with elevated acidity, or of course it could be part of a blend, often with Semillon. Semillon in the Grave, the Pessaglogno of Bordeaux, or even in some of the wonderful sweet wines of Sauternes and Balzac from Bordeaux. It's often confused with other varieties by wine growers historically, Sauvignon Nas, which is also known as Sauvignon Vert, or perhaps Sauvignon Gris, which are variations on the theme. Let's look at some of the characteristics that we might find in Sauvignon Blanc wines. Well, let's start in warmer conditions, because indeed there's a great deal of Sauvignon grown in the New World, particularly in perhaps California, Northern California, where the Sauvignon wines usually exhibit delicate fruit characteristics as opposed to the herbaceous side of the variety. For example, you might have ripe golden apple or Fiji apple as one of the aromatic elements, or melon, particularly melons like Crenshaw, more subtle, more understated yellow fruit characteristics. But when we think of Sauvignon at the opposite end of the spectrum, we think of very different flavor attributes. And at the extreme, owing to a chemical compound called methoxypyrazine contained in the Sauvignon Blanc grape, sometimes, particularly when the fruit is not fully ripe, you might find asparagus or green pepper or other green leafy aspects to the finished wine. Sometimes quite attractively, in cooler climate Sauvignon Blanc, you could find green herbs, particularly tarragon or dill, which adds a very attractive aromatic nuance to the wine. And of course, there are probably two fruits that we would associate with Sauvignon Blanc in particular in those cooler growing areas. Lime and lime peel in particular is quite prominent. And also kiwi, not just because it originates in New Zealand, but because there is that greenish aspect indeed to the aroma of many wonderful Sauvignon Blancs. Let's now look at three examples from different parts of the world. Well, let's start in France, in the Loire Valley, the birthplace of this grape variety, with probably the classic reference point for Sauvignon Blanc, and that would be Sancerre. Of course, we could also consider the fraternal, not identical, but fraternal twin of Sancerre, Puy-Fumé, on the other side of the Loire River. In Sancerre, soils vary according to location. There are soils that are very, very limestone rich, chalky to the eye almost. There are soils that have more clay and some that contain a bit of flint. All of these may add their own particular nuances to the style of Sauvignon produced in the Sancerre appellation. If we look at this wonderful example from a small producer, small domaine, Philippe Rimbaud, which in fact he names after fossils, fossilized shellfish found in his vineyards, Apud Syriacum. We find the more riper, softer, perhaps, expression of Sancerre. Why? Because Philippe likes to leave his grapes on the vine just a little bit longer than is commonly the case in this district. So in the nose of this Sancerre we find hints of lime and a suggestion of some sort of mineral chalkiness, although it's very hard to define exactly what the origin of that is in a bottle of wine. The wine enters the mouth very cleanly. There's an attractive center and that wonderful fresh acidity that we always associate with Sauvignon Blanc from cooler growing areas. And of course this wine has seen no wood treatment at all so as not to overwhelm all of those quite delicate characteristics. Well, let's now move to Sauvignon from the new paradigm, because Marlborough, New Zealand has very quickly, perhaps just in the last 15 years or so, established an international reputation, particularly based on Sauvignon Blanc, making it the largest growing area by far in New Zealand. Here we have an excellent estate, Goldwater, producing what might be considered perhaps a more refined, understated example of Marlborough Sauvignon. This wine does not have the exaggerated herbaceous qualities. It does not have that what some people might call offensive asparagus aroma. On the contrary, it's quite complex to the nose. There's kiwi and lime peel and perhaps a little bit of the tarragon that we referred to. In the mouth, it starts quite generously, and you see that in the wonderful growing conditions, the maritime climate, and the long growing season in Marlborough, New Zealand. You find fuller wines with more elevated alcohol content, yes, but not missing any of the vibrant acidity that makes Sauvignon such an appealing variety. And then we come to a very different expression, and this brings us back to the more fruit characteristics that might be found in Sauvignon Blanc in warmer growing conditions. Here we have an excellent wine, very young, 2006, from Honig in the Napa Valley, and this wine has that subtle Crenshaw melon aroma. It's very clean. There's talented winemaking clearly at work here. It's subtle, it's slightly soft in the mouth. In other words, the acidity is modest, but it's very clean and very appealing in its own right, if so different than Sancerre or the Marlborough, New Zealand example that we have here. So let's have a taste of our Honig Sauvignon Blanc. Ah, beautiful. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a look at the other Millesima wine memos.